Hi, everybody. Welcome to Creating Worlds here at the Lightbox Expo. We're so happy that you're with us today, this morning, Sunday morning at 9 a.m. I'm calling this Worshiping in the Church of Art for our inspiration and spiritual guidance, particularly in this time. Let's talk about things that make us happy and inspired this morning. So I'm so happy to have such an esteemed panel here to talk about their roles as production designers, art directors, visual development artists in the world of animation and art and games and beyond. And I'm going to let each panelist introduce themselves with just a few sentences about themselves. I'm going to call it their highlight credits, because if I asked for them to list all of their credits, we might be here for the whole time. So their highlight credits, one or two, let's say like one project you're particularly proud of that maybe we might know or might be lesser known if you have it. And I'm going to start with Matthias. Matthias, welcome.
Okay. Hey, Maggie. Nice to see you again.
Good.
I mean, what people probably know most will be Zootopia or Ralph Breaks the Internet, the last movies I did for Disney, not as a production designer, as an art director for environments. But I've been in this business for a long time. I started in Europe, in Germany, traveled around to Denmark. So I made a lot of 2D movies over there. Then moved to Canada, and then from there to Disney. So Zootopia was my first American movie.
That's awesome. Okay, and how about Robert?
Hey everybody, Robert Kondo, and I started my career at Pixar. My first film there was Ratatouille. Worked on Toy Story 3, and then got to work on a couple other films such as WALL-E with Ralph and Coco a little bit, and Good Dinosaur. But left with my creative partner who I made a short with, The Dam Keeper, and started our own studio up in the Bay Area called Tonko House. And we are just trying to make stuff in the tradition of animation that we learned at Pixar. But yeah.
And avoid the fires, or how are you guys doing over there?
Yeah, staying huddled in. Today's air quality is better than yesterday or the day before, so things are hopefully getting better.
We had a joke, which is sad but true, is somebody held up a Pantone strip to the sky, the kind of orange, puce sky down here, and decided it was Pantone 130. So we've decided the color for the apocalypse is Pantone 130. I don't know if you guys have seen that meme going around the internet, but I thought that was scarily apt. Szymon, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Hi everyone. I'm Szymon Bernacki. I'm from Poland, but I work in Spain with Sergio Pablos at the Spa Studios. And you might know me from my work as production designer, one of two production designers on Klaus that came out last year at Netflix. So yeah, that's it. That's the short version.
That's awesome. Helen?
Hi, I'm Helen. I've been working in animation for about 10 years now. I've hopped around a little bit, but it's mostly about Disney animation. I guess my favorite project I've worked on was Paperman. It's like short and sweet, and I learned a ton on that project, and Jeff Turley was a dream to work with, so that was really cool. Currently, I'm co-production designing on Disney's 2021 release, Raya and the Last Dragon.
That's awesome. Ralph?
Started out as a hand-drawn animator, and I animated a lot for years, directed and produced some commercials, and worked on some stuff in LA for a long time, then ended up at Pixar in 92, hired in 92, and I've been there basically ever since. Last film I got to work on was Incredibles 2, which was a blast, so a big film to do in less than 2.5 years. So.
Why so fast?
That's the way we wanted to do it. So, and we switched places with a film too that was having some story issues. So
that's good, just to keep it exciting for you.
Yeah, that's right there, exciting.
Yeah. Luc, do I have that right? Yeah.
Yes, I'm Luc Desmarchelier. I've been doing animation for about 30 years. I started in small studios in Paris, and then went to Emblemation in London. Arrived in LA in '94. at the beginning of DreamWorks. Stayed there for a while. Then I, spent some time at Sony. I left Sony back in 2010. Been doing some freelance and teaching at Laguna and the Art Center, for a while. And I'm back at DreamWorks, production designing on an upcoming project.
And Marcin?
Hi, my name is Martini Akubowski. I'm from Poland. I was a production designer on Klaus along with Szymon. I also came up with the lighting system on the 2D characters that we used in Klaus. We've been exclusively working with Sergio Pablos at the Spa Studios for the last 9 years, but before that I was mostly working on advertising and CG shorts, mostly for animation studios in Poland.
Awesome.
So that's it.
And Noëlle?
Oh, hi, I'm Noëlle Triaureau. I started working at Sony on Surf's Up. I eventually became art director on Hotel Transylvania and production designer on Smurfs The Lost Village. And I'm currently at Skydance Animation, where I'm production designing on a feature and a short.
That's awesome. It's so illustrious, this crowd that we have, which is mind-blowing, and everyone I think in the chat is really geeking out, from like literally I've seen like Dominican Republic to the UK to South Africa to Missouri. Proud people hailing in the chat. They're all super excited to talk to you, and many have pointed out that you guys have been childhood heroes and you've already had such an impact. So no pressure, but this is really also, I think, if I have one personal agenda, I should say I'm Maggie Malone. I am right now currently a producer at Netflix, but you may know me more from my stint at Disney Animation as the head of creative affairs, where I was for quite some time. And then I took a bus stop through Illumination and got to work very briefly with all the wonderful folks there. And I think, for those of us who teach at UCLA or Art Center or where have you, one of the things I love is really highlighting how you guys are all human, and your art is amazing, but you guys have the same frustrations and trials and tribulations that we all have. And that even though you may be 20 or 30 or 10 years in the business, that we all still have the same headaches. So I invite you to kind of share some of your struggles or your frustrations in addition to some of your breakthroughs today. But I want to start with some basic questions that I have for you, and then perhaps us panelists have for each other. And the first one just being the basic, so what is a production designer anyway? And I'm going to throw that out specifically to Ralph first, and then you guys can kind of jump in and answer.
We tend to be the visual architects of the films that we work on. The big, broad stroke picture ideas, trying to kind of get into the story and the characters, and kind of setting the tone for the film. Sometimes designing the film more specifically, sometimes utilizing the artists that we have in our departments to kind of come up with something, through the research. So it's a lot of fun.
And then also, Helen, you had mentioned you'd been art director as well. Like, what can you guys describe briefly the relationship or the connection between art director and production designer?
Well, because at least from my personal experience, these movies are so big and there's so much to do. It really falls onto a team of people, no matter how you dice it. So for me, I always thought that the production designer works really closely with the directors to kind of come up with the vision, and then as a team, the production designer and the art directors, whether they're environments or characters, kind of work together to give the marching orders to the artists that they work with, and then also to take all of those designs through the pipeline, through the 3D asset departments and things like that.
That's cool. And I wanted to ask, actually, Noëlle had a question. Actually, for the panelists, do you remember what it was? But when we were talking the other day, you were asking about the connection between the production designers and the art department of storytelling.
Szymon asked that, right?
Right. Yeah, I had a few questions, but one of them was how involved can production designers be in storytelling? And so I think it's really a case by case. I would be very interested to hear all of you guys' experiences. Should I hand it off to someone, or Maggie, do you want to choose? Oh, how about you, Matthias? Do you have something of your experience? And were you involved with the story side as well, or just the visuals? Oh, Luc has something to say.
I'll jump in because I've worked with you, Noëlle, at Sony, and so you know, when we were working on Hotel Transylvania, I distinctly remember you kind of working on some kind of, you know, beats, you know, and illustration, you know, concept illustration for the movie that, you know, did influence the story. So I think there are a couple of ways in which, you know, our work relates to the narrative, you know, one of which is at the very early stage when we kind of coming up with ideas which are only loosely related to, you know, the outline of the story. We're trying to come up with things, and sometimes those kind of help, you know, inspire, you know, elements of the storytelling. And then, of course, there's the much more kind of specific way in which within production, you know, you have to kind of, you know, come up with visual solutions, you know, to things that problems that have been cooked up in the story department, and which may or may not be possible to illustrate. And so, you know, sometimes we kind of, you know, have to kind of, you know, come up with patches, you know, visual ways to kind of, you know, make the story work. But certainly, I think at the beginning, and it depends, you know, of the project. All projects are a little different, and directors, you know, may allow more or less of that influence to come through. But for sure, I think at the beginning, you know, we contribute to storytelling quite a bit.
I've found that it's been more possible if we have a smaller team, and sometimes at a larger studio, the opportunity for that conversation is lost, and someone needs to actively try to create it, or can certainly fall out. Which is a shame, because the more we get awesome people in the same room together, the more crazy and original the art is. And so finding writers, which was one of my jobs, who would be willing to take pieces of art into their office and literally put it around their office as inspiration, was always a good sign to kind of start the conversation. Absolutely.
I try and encourage the art and story department to actually be one department. On Incredibles 2, it literally was one department. And so, yeah, I mean, our visual currency is, our day-to-day currency is visuals, right? So, yeah, we're all in the storytelling part together, you know, boards or artwork, whatever, you know, kind of inspires the imagination, you know.
So whose question? I think this was Marcin. Was this your question about, do you regret taking the production designer position?
Yeah, maybe not regret, but like, have you ever had doubts, or you were asking yourself, you know, what you were doing that in the production? Because I have to confess that, you know, I didn't know what it really meant when I started being a production designer. And so for me, it was like building up all the visuals, like giving all the visuals for the story department and for the director to work with. But then I realized that we are also part of the pipeline and part of production. And since our studio was very small at the beginning, especially, and not everything was well organized, we found ourselves in position where we were really uncomfortable with. So we were playing with charts, you know, Excel sheets and all that stuff, like, you know, making endless lists of like items in the movie that, you know, someone has to put in the system in a shotgun or whatever. So that part was so frustrating, because in the room next to me, my artists, you know, they had fun creating all that incredible art. And we just didn't have time for that. We could just only judge it. And so that was the moment that I thought that, okay, I'm not gonna, you know, have it again ever. Later, you know, the process was much more rewarding, I would say. But this moment, this particular moment, was terrible So I'm just curious if you guys had similar experience.
Yeah, and particularly if you guys maybe miss that that aspect that sometimes maybe that you could do it yourself, you could do it faster, maybe better, or you have a vision for, but you just have to let go, like you have to let someone else do it. And how do you deal with just kind of just having to let go, in so many cases?
I don't like parfait charts. I know we have to deal with them. I make my own parfait charts, but I try to have a really great manager. I've been lucky and had nothing but great managers, and I let them deal with it. But I tend to not want to look at that except once a week or so. And I'm sure lots of you have had to deal with this. I don't want them to start counting things until we know what we're doing. I've seen and heard of productions and actually dealt with it at least once, where they want to start isolating assets for someone to build and construct and down the, and I'm like, wait, we don't even know what the story is yet. So let's just not do that for about 6 months. And we can deal with that later. Someone else can deal with that, but I'm not going to start counting things right now. So
there's like having worked on smaller productions where you have like a budget of, I don't know, 7 million, 20 million, you're often like put exactly in this, like you don't have a production support, never necessarily, or your art director / production designer because, they don't have enough money to hire more people. That can be really hard and frustrating. It's also a challenge to like make a movie in 1 year, that sort of thing, from beginning to scratch to end. So coming to Disney, that was it's in a way it's easier to work in a big studio because every department will plus it. Like I love when artists are better than me. That there's just so much wonderful talent. So it's more of a, you can actually do your job, which is like guide the team, make it a coherent unit, that sort of thing. The other thing I wanted to mention is the insecurity. I think it's good to always be a little bit insecure about the thing you're doing because it keeps you alert and humble. And I wasn't thrown into production design like from nothing, but I started as a layout supervisor. I was insecure about that. Art director was insecure about that, and so on. And eventually you realize that that's not really going away. Like there's that that feeling that not every artist, but a lot of amazing artists still feel like they're winging it, and and hopefully nobody will ever find out that they're not capable. It's just a feeling that you'll have to live with, and once you know that that's the way it is, it's kind of okay.
Do you remember, Matthias, when you had those kind of oh shit, what am I doing moments, or was there 1 or 2 where you felt like you were thrown into the deeper part of the ocean?
Well, the biggest step probably was coming from working in my attic in Vancouver, going to Disney, and they hired me as an art director from, so I knew I was going to go down there as an art director, and I had no idea why they wanted me, because obviously, there's a lot of talent there. Like, so I was really scared every day, what do they want from me that, that they don't have, that sort of thing. But thankfully, like everybody was so sweet to me, and then there's the time pressure. So you don't have time to be insecure because it's got to get done. So you just have to start making choices.
And I wanted to ask Robert too, because Robert, anybody who's probably experienced making his own spreadsheets and starting something up and holding it all together when you basically started Tonka House, like what was that like in terms of you being like a businessman and an artist? Like, how did you balance that?
I don't know. I'm still figuring that out. I mean, I think, my weeks are kind of spent half, really running the business and talking to all the fun Hollywood and lawyers and things like that. But the other half is really continuing to make art. I think like, in the beginning of your career, I really feel like, man, I would do anything to just be able to draw and paint on a film. And I feel like as you kind of progress through the experience of making film and making artwork, you start to realize that it's less about the artwork and more about the film, and that all of the parts and pieces of it, whether it's music, editing, acting, all of it sort of has to coordinate together in the end to make a film, and the art department is sort of one part of it. And part of like coordinating with everybody is really learning how to communicate with things, not just the artwork, but also the charts and all the doodads and bits and pieces that allow for such a giant mechanism to move forward. And I think, you know, in the end, it's funny because in the beginning, you know, I remember my first day on Ratatouille, I was hired by Harley Jessup and Jan Pinkava, and they brought me into this room, and Carter Goodrich had turned in this new package of character designs and filled the entire room. So it was like Dominique Louise, beautiful pastels, and Carter's like beautiful character designs on one blank board. And I remember they were like, oh, that's your board. And I was just, holy shit, like, what am I doing here? And I agree with Matthias, it just, that feeling never goes away, but I do feel like now the artwork is really self-expression and release. And that's kind of my safe haven now, where I get to control everything that goes on that little piece of paper, and everything else I feel like is like, so I feel so out of my control, and I feel like I'm constantly sort of navigating that. So I feel like that's where, you know, the progression of from kind of where that passion starts and where the discoveries and shifts in paradigms for me was really shifting from really wanting to just make paintings and artwork to really wanting to be involved in making film and influencing story and production. And so that's, you know, that's kind of how, for me, you know, with starting Tonko House, it's been, is just more and more finding that balance to be able to work with a larger group of people.
That's
But
awesome.
that's like, oh, sorry.
No, Helen, go.
I think that that's so great to bring up, because I feel like the most gratifying thing for me going from a biz dev artist to art director to production designer is the more I've kind of progressed in that track, the more I've met other people from other departments. And every single day they're teaching me about what to do and how they go about doing things and things that are important to them and the information they need. And especially through this last film, we've become really great friends as well. Like, we have like a group chat and we like dunk on movies and stuff, and it's really fun. But it's like, it's such a, animation is so collaborative, and there's so many needs from all these different departments, and you really get the exposure of that once you kind of are able to work on more movies. And like, that's one of the advices I would give myself looking back, is to learn about other people's workflow and other departments' jobs earlier, and be open to talking to them about it, and just being okay with not knowing all of the answers and letting them help you, you know? So that's been the most gratifying thing that I've learned so far.
Luc?
You know, there's different stages, you know, and, you know, everybody's kind of got, you know, bringing some piece of the puzzle to this. It's true, and it never goes away, you know. There's the beginning where you're able to do artwork and great kind of, you know, concept, you know, and feel really good about your art and stuff, and then production start, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, you're collaborating with a ton of people and it's so exciting. And then comes the point where, oh my God, I don't have time to do anything anymore but post-it notes, and I'm in meetings all day, and what have I done again, you know? And then there's the feeling of total kind of, you know, I'm drowning, it's never gonna happen, you know, I'm failing. And then eventually the movie gets done and you go, oh, whew, oh, that wasn't so bad. Shall we do another one? You know, and so there's all those different stages, you know, in production, and also different. They're really kind of different work, right? I mean, the visual development part of it is you know, kind of, you know, takes a certain side of your artistic personality, and then, you know, in production you have to, you know, deal with management, you know, both, you know, with the production and you know, as a manager yourself. And then, you know, so I think it's part of the production designer's job is that it's not just one job, it's a series of jobs depending on what, you know, part of the production you're at.
We had one question from the group, and kind of a context, one last context question. And Helen, you kind of hit on it a little bit, of just very briefly the difference between a visual development artist versus, we've talked about art director versus production designer, but Viz Dev artist. What is it, and what do you miss from being it?
I definitely miss not having to go to all these meetings. As a Viz Dev artist, you get a lot of time to sit there and to sit with your art and to do drawings and to pitch ideas, and it's really fun. But but I don't know how it is at other studios. Matthias, I'm sure you experience this at Disney, but our calendars get booked really fast. And there's almost no time to draw anymore. And when I do draw, I've done some of the worst drawings of my life in the last 3 months. Oh my God, it's just scribbles. And I'm like, please, like, ignore the ugly drawing, but just like this, you know? And so it's like, it's no longer about like doing beautiful paintings. It's more about communicating ideas and adding information for specific uses like modelers or texture artists or things like that. So that's the big difference. And a good production designer, I find, or like in my experience as a visitive artist, the ones are the ones I didn't even know was protecting me behind the scenes. That was keeping all of that extra stuff away from the artists and was giving us all of the fun stuff to do, you know?
Yeah, it's a good thing to have done VisDev before you become a production designer, so you know the needs. I think, like for example, one thing like what Helen already said is like just keep the trouble away from the art. Like the artist just has to be able to play and come up with stuff and design. The other thing I found is that clarity is really important. Like when I was or when I'm working as a VisDev artist, the worst thing is if I'm afraid that it might not be what they want, or if I'm unsure what they're looking for. Not specifically because I have to come with it, but emotionally or the needs of the set or something like that. So I think for us, it's really important to keep the artists motivated, but also as informed as possible about what they're doing, as concise as possible, so they can just basically, enjoy the painting rather than having to worry about if it's this or that sort of thing.
So actually, it's very important. Sorry if I could jump in, because there was something that was one of the biggest revelations that I had, because my path from being a visual development artist to being a production designer was super short and too short. I had no idea, like suddenly I'm a production designer. I've never even worked on a production, in a production, and I'm just doing some VisDev and suddenly I'm a production designer. So I had no idea whatsoever what the task really was. It was completely just going step by step and discovering, the madness, that this whole thing entails. But one of the things that was quite surprising to me is how important it is to keep the artist happy. And I felt like from being a freelance artist, working from home for me was completely normal to just get a brief, get a task, work for a week or a few days, then have a Skype call, show my work and then get a new briefing and work from home. Like I didn't need to be attended to, like I didn't need any extra encouragement. I was kind of self-sufficient. And then I found out that there's if you work with people, there's a whole group of people and you need to know how to work with them, you need to know how to motivate them, you need to know how to keep them safe from things that are happening around them and they don't need to know about. And if you fail at that, how big of an impact it can have on productivity. I think that was one of the biggest revelations, like the human aspect, that you're working with people and you're responsible. Like the more happy, quote unquote, they are, the more productive they are, the better work they do, and the more focused on work they are and less preoccupied with everything that's happening around. And so that was an interesting discovery, from the point of view of someone who just never went through all the steps and worked pretty much alone before. So that's it.
I want to ask you what you're thinking of specifically when you tell us that, but I won't, because I feel like I might give you some anxiety, recurring anxiety returning to you. So I think I'm going to turn now a little bit to try to make sure that I'm incorporating questions in from the Q&A. And one of them that's upvoted is how does one become a production designer? What are the skills necessary? You guys have touched on some management, like captain of the team, cheerleader, organizer, meeting attender skills, in terms of some of the skills necessary. But how do you think do you even know how you became a production designer? Was it a position that you went after, or was it something that where you just felt like what Matthias and Szymon had, where it was just plucked out of your attics or your basements and then all of a sudden put in the middle of a studio?
Well, I think everybody's pathway is probably different. I think for me, it was wanting to be an animator, and then I worked in some live action at American Film Institute. Had done some commercial work. I had always wanted to go to Disney, but was really there was not a lot of work going on in LA at the time. So I found myself doing a lot of jobs at a lot of different places, and then fell into a particular project that had 14 producers, and making them happy was very difficult. But I found by sitting down and kind of I was doing storyboards with chalk pastel in a way. I mean, and then suddenly they became scenes for the film, and I was just seeing the movie in my head as they were writing it. And suddenly I found myself as an art director, and then I kind of moved into production design. You know, I took a step sideways for a while and figured out what that was and what it meant. And you know, there's really not a lot of information out there, at least for animation film production design. It's really not any different than live action, other than the length of time spent doing it. I always get the funny question from friends of mine that primarily work in live action. It's like, you have some great credits, but you don't have that many. And, well, you know, Inside Out was 5.5 years, you know. I think Cars I didn't work on Cars, but I think it was about 6, and Coco was at least 5, you know. They just take a long time, you know. It's quite funny. Anyway, I think that was my kind of path, is trying to kind of figure out as many aspects of the filmmaking process as you possibly can. Not just art, it's not just artwork. You're not if you think it's just about making pretty pictures, you know, kind of hanging on a wall, you know, because we're making a film. There's film time, there's screen time. You got to pay attention to that. I love the comments that people had about working with the crew, because that's probably the most exhausting part of the job, is being a shrink. Lots of people, that's what it is, you know, and it's an important part of the job. You got to cheerlead people on and get them through their projects, and it's a hard part of the job, you know. So it's a very important part of the job though too. So anybody else?
You don't have to. I'm going to jump to, because we have so many great questions then. And Noëlle, I'm going to put this one to you. Are you involved in hiring talent? And if so, what key strengths are you looking for in an artist?
So far, we're a young studio, so we're starting, and we have a lot of projects that we need to hire for. I'm working on the Nathan Greno Untitled project. It's like we're working on a title, something a little bit more elegant, but of course we're going to be having some viz dev needs as we go along, and I'll be giving my feedback and encouraging and welcoming talented creatives to join our studio. At Skydance Animation, it's really important to us to have representation, to have people with diversity of voices. I really love working at that studio. The first 2 features that are going to come out are being directed by really talented women. And then my experiences since January of 2019, when I started, is that I've been very welcome and supported to contribute and to collaborate in ways that I had not been exposed to before. And not just me, but I see that it's a very inclusive culture that they're putting together in that studio. So yes, I'm being involved in hiring, and I'm really welcoming people from different backgrounds. I'm also encouraging and inviting women to come and visit us, talented, creative women, and men who want to work with women to come and visit us in our studio, because it means a lot to us to represent diversity, but also not only in our story, but in our teams. And we're doing really big progress on that level. So it's, you know, I'm very excited to be working with John Lasseter and Holly Edwards, because they're the ones who are setting up that whole spirit.
You kind of touched on this, but is there, and this is directly a Q&A question, that came in early, and I'm glad that it's here. And they say that this might be tricky, but we're all about figuring out what's tricky here. Is there any advice for women and minorities managing expectations in this industry?
I feel that we are in a day and age where people are getting much more aware and mindful of social issues that, I mean, we've seen it. 2020 has exacerbated a lot of issues. And I think the industries at large are shifting in a positive way. So I truly believe there are more opportunities now than there has been before. I see it on a daily basis where I work. So I would encourage anyone to really aspire and just set their goals as far as they want, because I see that things are shifting.
That's awesome. In terms of also shifting, I think you had a comment or a question about this for the group, which was what new tools are out there. Do you guys see any new tools out there that is really changing the business or your workflow? This is where I fully expect Robert to like lean in and say, I am the change.
It's interesting, right? Our studio, I think like many studios, we're a small studio. We have, about 20 people or so right now. And, during the shelter in place, we had to move remote. So a lot of the online tools such as Zoom, but one of the tools that we started using is a tool called Miro. It used to be called Real-Time Board. And what it is it's kind of like a Google shared doc, but you're allowed to kind of post images. And so far that I've seen, we haven't hit a limit as to how many images we can have in a single doc. So what that is it allows us to create a production design doc that has right now we're designing a series. So we have the entirety of the visual development of the entire series from beginning to end, the characters, all the design work marked out in sort of how we progress in terms of process. So, if we have like a sort of a prep for pre-visualization phase, all of that stuff is marked out. So when you look at this doc, what's really great is that you can look across it and see that, well, we've really worked in Act 2 quite a bit, and we've got tons of work, but our Act 3, Act 1 is empty. And it's sort of a passive way to let production and everyone else know that we're not developing the bigger picture. And so what I found is that it's been an incredible tool to facilitate the hard discussions that I don't want to have, and allows for everyone to see the same problem, so we can kind of quickly get to talking about solutions rather than sort of spending a lot of time having to illustrate what the problems are. So this Miro is an online app that we've been beginning to use, and I really love it because, and I'm sure like the bigger studios actually have way cool proprietary tools, but at least I think in the indie world, what I found is our first days outside of, when Dice and I left Pixar was, oh crap, we've got to call AT&T and install our own internet. That's going to take like a week. So in that way, we've been trying to piece together a production pipeline and sort of resources that sort of replicate what we think would be helpful for the production. So that's one kind of technical tool that we've implemented that's fairly new for us.
Yeah, that's a good point. I have the same experience. Instead of Miro, people are asking what it's M-I-R-O. We have another one called Bluescape, which is the same thing from another company. And that's so intuitive for artists to not have to go through a program like Shotgun or whatever the studio's proprietary version of that is, which is very production oriented, and you have to know exactly what you're looking for. It's great to have this big canvas where you see all the art and also even maybe the art that's discarded. Like I often have the problem that in big studios, there's so much great art generated, but it sinks into this black hole. And there might have been a solution found, months ago for something that's then forgotten because it's hard to get to that image. So yeah, I agree with Robert. Those programs are great.
It's funny to hear, the same things that we experienced, like, all the assets that we know it's somewhere. It just, and you are the only, person who remembers that, right? And then you think you are crazy because it's been lost somewhere in the system.
But it's also so refreshing to actually hear it coming from you guys working in huge studios, because we felt like that was our problem because we were just setting up the studio as we were producing the movie. And so obviously there was so many challenges. We felt like that was specifically our problem. That seems that it's not. It's a common thing. It's
not just a production problem. I think it's a creative problem, because if you're only looking at that one object, suddenly that's your only option. If you have like a creative board where you're able to see it, I mean, I put up new artwork and new reference and rotate it constantly. And Bluescape and Miro are both great tools, especially now, of course, and would utilize them, but it wouldn't prevent me at all from doing presentations with real artwork on real boards, because I want people to make connections they wouldn't make otherwise. If they're only looking at the artwork intended to be for the final film, it doesn't interest me. I want them to look at what we're presenting as well as other things that might inspire them, or like, oh, I didn't think of that picture you have of an ant up here, but that it might go with this over here. You know, you get less and less of that as production goes along, especially with a lot of these asset programs. You know, it'd be great if we could think of these things as some sorts of different sorts of groupings and be able to visualize, see them that way, like we do as artists. You know, like we used to keep our files, you know, our little art files. You know.
So does any of you guys use VR or like, you know, Quill or this kind of stuff to design sets or for anything really? Is that something that you think is going to be interesting to?
Yeah, because we started talking about production stuff, and you know, since our audience is probably mainly students, they just don't give a, you know, damn about what we're talking about. So let's maybe talk about creative tools, right?
Yeah, it so happens that I have an artist on our team that is using VR to just get started, to really start as though he's got clay putty in front of him and just create a whole world, and then really, you know, with the goggles, just figure out what angle.
He looks like he's possessed or something, right, from outside.
Yeah, it's a bit scary. And then when you watch what he's watching, you're trying to not, you know, it's like you have to really be, it's like, yeah, on a roller coaster, it's like you're trying to keep your food in. But it's fascinating because it opens up, you know, angle is pretty much what 3D softwares were for us, you know, 20 years ago or plus. When we were first starting, it's like, yeah, I want to just the basic of that software so that I can find, you know, block out some cool architecture and then get a cool angle. But now you can really play into it and just, you know, it's so intuitive, it's so fast that, you know, you don't even have to remember the short keys and all that stuff. You just put it together and choose what angles you want. So it's a bit mind-blowing, but you have to enjoy putting those goggles on for a while.
Yeah, but we are thinking, you know, for the next production to, let's say, force story artists to start using 3D environment, and we want to try the simplest thing, which is grease pencil in Blender, because very often story artists disregard the designs and the 3D space totally. They are not trained in you know, understanding and showing the perspective, and then, you know, when it goes to the production team, to the visual development artists, we have a big headache because we don't know how to tackle the things that just don't make sense. So we will try to just force people using that and see what's going to happen. Maybe they will just hate us and they will go back to the old school approach, but let's break them and reshape them.
Well, what's really cool about this approach is that it's almost leaning into previs, and previs is always fantastic when you have a show that's set up where you can do that and bring in different people from different departments to quickly block in things and work with the director to figure out what angle, what lens, and things like that to shoot things from. And basically, what do you need to design from there and not have to design the entire world, because this is only what you're going to be seeing. But unfortunately with VR, there's still limits. You're not choosing your lens and such things. But it's a step towards it. And I think it problem solves certain things as well. So it's really cool to see yourself evolve in the world and blocking it out very fast.
I think that's actually a good tip for artists is because we're designing for a three-dimensional space, it actually knowing some kind of 3D program could be this. I mean, I'm using SketchUp for years, which is not new at all. But it's super helpful to design a space and then take shots from that and design over that. So you're not just making stuff up that can't be built. That sometimes can be, especially if something's really complex, can be very helpful for production. And then you can actually bring that stuff into VR, for example, and look at it. I found that when we bring directors into VR, they're usually just so blown away by the experience that it's hard to get productive notes at this point.
Or you're risking, going to the area where at the beginning of 3D, when they discovered the possibilities of the camera moving anywhere, then they just went crazy. They forgot about what they learned as filmmakers, and they created this terrible camera motion, and it stopped looking like a real movie, right? So we are risking that again.
So we have just about 15 minutes left to hit the kind of the bulk of questions. And there's kind of two doors. Do you guys want to talk about moments, like some specific breakthrough moments on films that you've had, or other projects that you've had, and how that art is meeting the needs of the film, but also maybe surprising in a certain way of your approach, or advice to yourself 10, 15, 20 years ago, because I certainly do feel that we have a lot of younger, aspiring professionals in the audience as well, who would love to hear what books you found inspiring and what classes you found most helpful as you built your toolkit to become a professional. Inspiration on artwork, or what I wish someone had told me?
Actually, Robert Kondo was my teacher in school. He taught a class.
No way. And you're still talking to him.
Yeah, he taught a class at the Academy of Art where I was going. It was like one of the only animation film classes, and it definitely had an impact on me trying to do animation instead of the original track I was going, which is more illustration based, So thanks, Robert.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think Helen was a much better student than I was a teacher, and I think that goes to show in all that she's done since. But yeah, I think that one thing that was definitely changed the track for me is one thing I really loved about being in the art department at Pixar was the emphasis on research, and how important it is to really know a space and know a feeling. It's, I think, on Ratatouille being my first film, I read every photography book, looked at everything for the first year and a half, having never been to Paris, never been to Europe, not realizing that nothing in the US is really all that old. And then going to Paris and saying, whoa, that stone step has actually been worn down by generations and generations of people walking on these steps it was such a mind shift for me in understanding that what I was creating was sort of artwork that I thought was helping the film, but not actually capturing the space. So I would recommend, for a lot of artists to kind of do everything you can to just draw what you know. And at the same time, go and work with people that really inspire you. I mean, it's really nice that, for Helen to call that out, but I also feel like for me, what's really great about this call is, Ralph Eggleston was sort of one of my mentors, one of the people who really, I think for a lot of CG animation production design, he's kind of someone who has pioneered what the process seems so normal now. But, I know when Ralph was sort of starting at Pixar, and he really established a lot of the things that I think all of us take as like a day-to-day now. But yeah, so for me too, it's like, being at a place where, and surrounded by people who are just sort of better than you and have been there, is the best thing. So I'd say that's my two things, is research, and then surrounding yourself by people whose work you love, I think is really important. Yeah.
I think, well, thank you, Robert. You're very kind, and you're very talented as well. And we were very lucky to have you. But it is funny, starting out early days at Pixar on Toy Story, we had very talented crew, very small art department, 4 people. A lot of the technical staff, and I don't like to separate them, but for right now I need to. Brilliant engineers, mathematicians. They were building the hardware and the software while we were making the movie, and they were making the movie. But I'll be honest, a lot of them didn't have great visual skills. And so there was a frustration there that lasted for some time until relatively recently, 10 years ago maybe, wherein a lot of them wanted to be more artistic and wanted to be more artistic and wanted, you know, and some of them were and some of them weren't. But the reality was that it was a lot to take on just getting the film done, much less training people not how to technically do their job, but how to have a visual skill set. You know, but we really did work on that. And of course the generations and the tools got better and the artists using the tools got better. So only relatively recently are we able to get back as production designers back to our real job, which is character and world building and storytelling through what we're designing. And it's research is key, like Robert said, and not just Google. Google's great, it's a great tool, but going out and looking at the things and feeling them and touching them and seeing them yourself to understand why they became what they became, it's terrific. And then zooming out to use all of those things you've learned in your research to be able to tell the story. There's a really great book I've recommended it to a lot of people lately. It's a book called The Big Goodbye by Sam Wasson, W-A-S-S-O-N, and it's actually on the making of Chinatown. And a lot of the book is about Richard Silver, the great film production designer's work on the film. And it covers a lot of ground on his thought process for designing that film, which has been a guiding light for me. His thought process on designing that film has been a guiding light for my entire career. I was just talking about this yesterday. This is not what he's designing, but how he's thinking about what he's going to design in terms of how it affects the story and the characters and how it is absorbed into the story itself as a visual medium, the film medium. So can't recommend that highly enough. So, but I always come back to character. If you're designing a film, if you're starting from a place of character, that you really can't fail, you know.
That's awesome. Luc, you teach so much. What are the one or two pieces of advice that you just wish you could get through your students' heads faster?
Well, practice, you know, work. Talent is not something that happens to you. It's something you develop by practice, you know. And so a lot of I think, you know, very gifted, you know, students are, you know, making a lot of headways only through new practice. I mean, that's the only way you will get ahead, you know, and really, you know, turn your potential into a real professional activity. You know, you're just going to do it all the time and get super good at it. That's one thing. But, you know, lean into your natural inclinations. That's what I would say. I mean, you know, for Ralph, it's that book on, you know, the production design of Chinatown. You know, for me, it would be, you know, a childhood kind of soaking up, you know, French and American comic books. You know, whatever is kind of your natural inclination, in where to get inspiration and get, you know, rev up, you know, your creative energy and kind of, you know, kind of get that pressure cooker, you know, kind of that need to produce something, that need to do the art, you know, wherever you find that, you know, and oftentimes it's in other artists, you know, because we don't create anything out of nothing. We're not gods, you know, we're just normal people. But we kind of a little obsessive in our way of looking at things. So when we find something we like, we just soak it up, become obsessed with it for a while. We want to make it ours, you know, and indeed it becomes integrated as one of the building blocks of what is going to make our own artistic style, right? It's just all going to pile up, you know. It's like often students ask me, well, you know, where am I going to find, you know, my style? What's my, you know, thing? Or how do you find your own things? Like, you don't have a choice. It's going to come through you, whether you like it or not, just by, you know, the accumulation and the processing, you know, of all your favorite stuff, your favorite influences. That's what's going to come through, you know, your art. So yeah, lean into your natural inclination, work hard, and be nice. Don't be a jerk, or, you know, the equivalent, keep your personality, be exigent, be all that you are, but keep in mind that, for all industry, box office and, appeal and it's a very small, world, animation. And so you're going to work with people 10 years down the line that you thought you'd never see again, And so just behave nicely to everybody. It's just good. It's just a good thing, because it's a community. It's a, it's a small world, and we're all going to bump into each other over and over again. And so, be yourself, but be nice.
Yeah, I would add, be self-sufficient, because you won't get all the attendance you think you need. Very often everybody is super busy, so you should be prepared to solve the problem by yourself. And that makes you more reliable. You'll be trustworthy. So for me, that matters a lot. If I give someone a problem, I don't want to hear him complaining. If I hire a plumber to fix my pipes, I don't want to hear, "Who've done that to you? Like, this is ridiculous," right? I don't want to hear that. I want him to fix my problem. That's what I expect from my artists also, to come up with solutions through their experience. Yeah.
I think if you're a VisDev artist and you want to practice to be an art director or a production designer, one thing you can do is you can critique your own work, and you can, in your head, critique others, or listen to the critique of others and then figure out why that is. Because a big part of our job is to, we only have a few shots to, say an asset is designed. So we have a couple of rounds on design, a couple of rounds in modeling, and so on. And you have to make sure that you can really fast say, how can I make this better? And that's a skill, I think, that you can practice just in your head by always thinking, how could this be better?
About becoming art director or production designer, of course, we all know it's a very competitive area. There's a lot of very, very talented artists who stay VisDev artists, and they're fantastic at what they do, and they are very deserving. So it's not because somebody spent his or her whole career doing VisDev that he or she is less of an artist or an amazing asset to the studio. And I think we have to bear that in mind, because there's not as many positions, unfortunately. So there's also a part of luck, or just the right place, right time, and such things that are also to bear in mind. And maybe there can be more opportunities in either starting studios or other places that one doesn't usually think of. And of course, if people are targeting big studios, then that's where the biggest competitions are, I think.
I would also like to add something, if I could, to what Luc said about leaning towards your natural inclinations, because I get quite a lot of emails from students, and they tell me about how they approach their development. And it's very rigid, structured, kind of like a military approach to it, that Monday I do perspective, Tuesday I do anatomy, Thursday I do whatever. And what I see very often is that they very quickly lose the side of what they are passionate about in art, what really brought them into the whole area, what makes them excited. Like they feel like they can't or they shouldn't just draw for fun anymore, because now this is a school assignment, and obviously, improving your fundamentals is very important. But if you turn this into all of it into like a school assignment, into something that you like, you do things in a way that someone else told you how to do, and you lose track of what really gets you, that pressure cooker that Luc mentioned, like, what really gets you excited? Why did you get into it? Do you love drawing cars? So maybe draw cars for half a year, because maybe you're going to be a car designer, the fact that someone tells you that you need to learn this and you need to learn that shouldn't derail you, I think, from shouldn't push your passion away and just turn it into a school assignment, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but learn perspective.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you can kind of dress up your passion. Like you can practice things like perspective or fundamentals of design and infuse them into whatever you're excited about doing. Yeah. But I think just focusing on some kind of a schedule that you found on the internet, or this artist or that artist telling you that you should just do this or you should just do that. But if it doesn't feel like you're excited about it, then you just need to find a way to just be excited about drawing, painting, design, and being an artist, you know.
So I'm going to close out with one question to the panelists, and then I also want to talk to particularly the international students in the chat that are blowing up the chat right now, which is great. My last question to you is where do you go for inspiration? What recharges you? Where and what are some of your wells? And before I ask you guys to answer that, and I'll start with Noëlle on that, is I was going to yell at the international students who were very honestly and wonderfully voicing their lack of access to some of the types of art schools that we all in the Western Hemisphere have had luck based on geography to go to attend, to learn from. And I was going to say, you need to come together as your own community and share your own Instagrams and art stations and DeviantArt, and they're doing that. And I really encourage you guys that as much as it's helpful and wonderful to have mentors and teachers to look up to, it is equally important, and in some ways actually becomes more so to band together with your peers. And frequently you will not feel like anybody has the answers, but you will find that you find them together. And those are in some ways the most valuable moments because they're hard won and they're handmade of your own. So what you are doing right now in the chat is the most important part of Lightbox. Let me repeat that. What you are doing right now in the chat by sharing your own sites is the most important part of a Lightbox. Please find us 20 years from now or 30 years, wherever we are in whatever convalescent homes we are in, and tell us that we are right, because I would like that satisfaction. So I'm now going to close just very quickly with this Creating Worlds panel. I'd like to hear from all of you. Where do you go to recharge? Where is your well of inspiration? Noëlle, can you kick us off?
My well of inspiration is, as Ralph was kind of alluding to, is nature. It really is nature. I love scuba diving. I love discovering the world, you know, places that I'm not used to. It just sparks so much inspiration. So that's where I turn to.
Helen?
It's basically just anything that isn't specifically drawing and art. So I do, you know, just hanging out with my husband. We'll do it. Sometimes I play a lot of video games, but I'll do it, you know. I think it's important for me to realize that to not wrap my whole self into my work, because it is still work, and it is still work with a bunch of people who have equal right to ownership to it, and it's not really, and nothing is ever gonna be totally mine. And so to have that time outside to do stuff that I like, and to do just even random drawings that don't mean anything for anybody and nobody wants to see, like I think that's the most important thing, is not letting work be all of my life. You know, I draw a pretty hard line that when I get off work, I just don't think about it anymore, and I don't draw, and I just, you know, like talk to my sister or hang out with friends on Zoom or anything else.
And you like anything else?
Anything else except for art.
I would strongly recommend like detaching from social media, honestly, like, you know, just lay on the grass, let your thought go crazy. Let's just, you know, let's embrace the stream of thoughts going through your, like loose thoughts going through your brain. I think that's, you know, you can be surprised if you free yourself from the tension around you. It's super refreshing.
Well, but I would say that if you're a student, be obsessed about your work. Like, I think that's when you have the time and the physical strength. I think if I think about, I'm just 35, I'm still young, but if I think about doing the things that I was doing when I was 25 and just spending countless hours and nights painting, I just couldn't do it anymore. So I think just embrace the fact that you are physically capable of being obsessed and going crazy, and just, you know, squeeze that lemon. And yeah, there's gonna come a time when you're just gonna relax or just gonna treat it as work. But I think it's healthy and unhealthy at the same time to be obsessed about it.
Yeah, so after 40, you lay on the grass before.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my lemon is well squeezed and juiceless right now, so.
Luc, anybody else? Robert?
Yeah, well, for me, it's always a need of making stuff, and because part of what got me into the art at first was that kind of, I just like making things. And so, whether it's kind of doing little, woodworking or fixing something or kind of cooking, I've been having fun with photography. Sometimes I will just, I do collections of stuff, like I pick sands whenever I travel to different places or to the beach. I kind of keep a little sand sample and I put them in little test tubes and I put them in a row like this. And, it's all, but to me, this all participate, I gather I like beach combing, for instance. You go to the beach, you go out surfing for a while, and then you walk up and down the beach and pick up stuff that you find, I've got a collection of dead insects, for instance, just picked up on the side of the road. I mean, but to me, this is all part of what inspires, and it's also part of the making process. It's the stuff that's gonna kind of, push me into making something out of it. I got a couple of bags of sands laying around. I'm gonna, maybe I could find a way to present it, and all of a sudden it's a project, and all of a sudden I'm making something. So it's not just the painting or the images, it's part of a larger process of making stuff for me.
That's cool.
One thing I would recommend is travel, which is like the wrong thing to say right now. But like, especially if you're American, get out of America and see other parts of the world, because that kind of builds a library inside of you. Like I was lucky to hike in Nepal once, and that scale of that landscape is inside of me. I'm from Europe, so if I have to do something old, I know what it feels like. It's really experience the world. Don't just stay in your room and do art, but like see the world if you can.
That's great. Ralph, Robert?
Dog parks. I love going to dog parks. It's kind of a meditation. Right now I don't have a dog. I wish I could have one, but I can't right now. But just watching them play and watching them interact, it's somewhat meditative. And I get to go home and I don't have to take care of the dog, which I don't mind doing. But again, right now I can't have one. So yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and I guess for me, like touching upon, I guess what everyone is sort of touching upon and sort of what the whole talk has been about is I think production design really is like part of being a collaborative team. And so a lot of times I think our job is to find ways to see multiple perspectives at the same time, whether it's our own perspective, the filmmaker, the director's perspective, the audience's perspective. And I really feel like the thing that is really challenging, but where I find my inspiration is really pushing myself to seek out new perspectives constantly, whether it's, go out in nature or, I have to say being in lockdown right now, it's like I can't go outside. The air quality is horrible. And with the pandemic, so I am locked inside. So I feel like whether, however you can find as quickly as possible, of course, trust what you know and trust what you really believe in, but also seek out the things that challenge that, I think, to be able to see new perspectives, because I feel like the more that you can absorb in that way, it really does become a part of you. And once you have that, your repertoire to pull from visually grows exponentially, I think. So as much as we can, I think as people, just constantly seek new perspectives and be curious about things. I think really for me, that's the path of an artist and a production designer.
Can't say it any better than that. I'm gonna close it out on that, Robert. Thank you. It's been a pleasure and a gift to talk to you, all of you guys. It's been wonderful to watch the connections happening in the chat as well. And here's to everyone staying safe wherever we are in the world. And here's to seeing all of you and having, as our paths do in animation, cross very, very soon. Thanks, guys, so much. Take
Thanks,
care.
everyone.
Bye-bye.